Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzalez here in studio with a prophecy update, and we are talking about a very interesting prophetic topic, and that is the topic of sleep paralysis. And I'm here with Vicki Joy Anderson, who wrote a book just recently, just fresh off the press, called They Only Come Out at Night, Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis. But before we do, I want to remind everybody about a couple items that are coming up that we want to make you aware of, and one of them is our Orlando Prophecy Summit. We are going to be in Orlando in March, having a prophecy conference, over 15 speakers, continuing to give you the up-to-date information on current events, Bible teaching, good fellowship with others that are looking for the rapture. And we know that things are getting close. It's exciting, and we know that things are coalescing into, again, all the things that the Bible said would happen. And if you have not been a believer in some of these things, man, it is time to wake up and to see all the things that are happening, because it's also easy to be evangelistic about some of these things. But also want to remind you that we are going to be going to Israel in March of 2023. So March is a busy month for Prophecy Watchers. Not only the conference, but we're going to spend about 10-12 days in the land of Israel, as well as giving you an opportunity to do a Petra extension, where we're going to go see Petra and Mount Nebo and a couple other exciting things in that country. You can find more information about that at visitisraeltoday.com. And join us. Price is very reasonable. No medical vaccination requirements of any kind, so that's very cool. Nothing to worry about. Just go and have fun. There are a lot of tourists re-engaging in the land of Israel right now, which is awesome. And so be one of them. So you're invited. But Vicki, welcome.
Hey, Mondo. Thanks.
We have been filming a couple other programs for television on Vicki's new book, but I wanted to bring it up in the sense of a prophecy update, because part of her book on sleep paralysis brings really the whole idea of spiritual warfare. And the Bible says in 2 Timothy 3:1 that in the end, perilous times are going to come, and it gives this whole description in chapter 3. But one of the things that you bring up in the book, and kind of give us a background of, and we'll continue to talk about the prophetic elements, but how did you come, I didn't ask you that before, but how did you come to write this particular book?
Well, I think because I experienced it most of my life, and it was something that I did not realize until my mid-30s was actually a phenomenon. I thought this was just something that was happening to me, because obviously it's not the kind of thing that you share with other people. I attempted to share it with a friend of mine in high school. It was kind of my first foray into maybe trusting someone with that information. And she came back to school on Monday and said, well, I talked to my mother, and you're possessed by a demon, and we need to get you to the church to get exercise. And I'm like, nope, we're not going to talk about this anymore.
Shut this down, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thought it was me. Like there wasn't a phrase, sleep paralysis, back in the 70s or even the 80s. I hadn't heard it anyway. And so I just thought, I just have a lot of bad dreams, and I mean, I did think it was spiritual warfare, but anyway, it was a big part of my upbringing in my life. It was just a very traumatic experience, and sort of shaped sort of who I was. I think for the good, because it was teaching me spiritual warfare. But in 2013, it came back, and it came back with much more harsh than I'd had it as a child. It was kind of escalated. And at that point, I knew thousands of people are reporting this, and this is a spiritual war, and the times are growing dark, and there is an actual motive behind this. This is part of the end times agenda. And so at that point, I started studying and researching. I mean, I am a writer by trade, and so why it never dawned on me prior to write an actual book on this topic, I don't know. But the more I began to research, I decided I don't want to regurgitate the stuff that's already out there. I don't want to copy paste what's already been said. And so I started to delve very deeply through prayer and fasting. And it took me a while to even get permission, because this isn't the kind of thing we just shouldn't be delving into it unless you're called to do that. And so as things started to get revealed to me, as dots started getting connected, as it started to actually make sense to me, I thought at this point it would not be right to not share this information, because there's a lot of people out there who just want to get rid of the experience. They just need help. They just need counsel. They just need someone who will listen to them. But on the other hand, because we are called to expose the deeds of the devil, I felt that it was at that point my calling to expose this particular aspect of the agenda.
You know, let's talk about that for a minute, in the sense that maybe you're out there and you're watching this and you're like, sleep paralysis, what is that? Well, or maybe you go, oh, I've kind of done that. I've participated, or I've had this happen to me, or whatever, and you're working through how to fully understand, which Vicki's book does a great job, very thorough. You go from beginning to end. You interact with peer-reviewed articles and doctors and the way that they try to describe it, because this isn't something that is just make-believe. It's something where people have these experiences. They go to their medical professional, and the medical professional throws a label on it, maybe tries to prescribe something, maybe some, hey, help you sleep, some sleeping pills or whatever, and you engage that. But you also are very thoroughly biblical. But let's talk about, we did this in a couple of other programs, but for this particular prophecy update, what are the different options? Is every single, let's talk about the physiology, is every single instance a spiritual warfare? Where does it begin? Where does it end? Where does it morph into something more?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so not every sleep paralysis is an actual sleep paralysis episode. And so as we've discussed in prior episodes, there's a biological explanation for it. There are certain levels of sleep where, as we get deeper and deeper into sleep, our bodies does shut down and enter into deep relaxation, and it's just for our protection. It's so we're not rolling out of bed or kicking people or getting up and beating people up and sleepwalking or wetting the bed. And so it's there for our protection. And so when we talk about sleep paralysis, as I'm outlining in my book, what we're technically talking about are supernatural and demonic encounters that occur during these times in the night when our body is in paralytic states. And it doesn't happen to anyone. There's people that wake up in a state of sleep paralysis all the time, and there's no fear, there's no visions, there's no entity. They
just know they can't move, and they're like, oh, and I mean, all of us have experienced this. I hope that you admit it, because there are times like, I'm trying to move, and my body's, and I'm trying to like, wake up, move. And then I always like try to jump, and then it would kind of shock me out. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
So we've all experienced that, but in that particular instance, I didn't have any fear. There was no entity there or whatever. So that's like stage one, which is the natural. What's the next stage or phase?
The next phase is this realization that you are awake and can't move is accompanied by extreme levels of terror.
Fear. Terror, yeah.
And it's not the same as, we've all like had that experience where we think, is someone breaking in the house? Like we hear a window break or we hear a door creak, and there's that adrenaline rush. Unless you've experienced it, the adrenaline rush that occurs during sleep paralysis is absolutely incomparable to other aspects of fear, like when you slam on your brakes and the semi misses you. It's a completely different level. It's a different type of fear. Is
it external based, potentially?
It is, and it's at a soul level. It's not just something that's happening in your mind.
Because it's being brought on by something, another that's spiritual.
They're bringing an actual energy into that room that you can sense, and so that's the next level, is the fear. And then there can be visualizations, and there can be auditory, there can be visual, there can be a sense of smell, footsteps, voices, entities actually appearing. And at that point, if it continues to escalate, you can go into the realms then of lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, and actual astral projection.
It's interesting that, in thinking about the supernatural element, how often do we see an angel shows up, a good angel, right? And what's the first thing they say?
Fear not.
Yeah, fear not. Hey, this is something supernatural. They are so beyond us in our very weak, limited state as humans. They're bringing something to play, which automatically brings in, interdimensionality, whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's something beyond us, and it causes something visceral in us to respond. And they're saying, hey, relax. You know, even Jesus said it to John in in Revelation chapter 1, hey, fear not, you know, take it easy. But yet, what we're seeing here is, give some of the, in addition to fear, what are some of the other characteristics? You describe them in the book. What are some other, because you're getting feedback from people. You're getting, it's not just your own situation, but now people are feeling free to talk to you.
Yep.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so you've got anything from I can see or it feels like something is sitting on my chest, a shortness of breath, a feeling of being strangled. Many people will report waking up in the supine position. They're on their backs. It can happen sleeping in any position, but a large majority of people are on their backs for some reason. There can also be violence, there can be aggression. There's people that talk about getting pulled out of their bed, or they feel something in the bed next to them, or something moving, or something getting out of the bed, or something touching them.
Have you ever seen any reports of physical marks or bruises left?
There are people that report that say that when they wake up, there's actual evidence that matches the event. Mm-hmm. And I know that it can happen, and it can happen to anyone, but a lot of times when I hear people talk about that, there's usually something very extreme going on in their life. They're dabbling with the occult outright, they're from a generational satanic family, or there's some sort of like SRA going on.
So it's a little bit different than what we're describing.
Yeah, so the average person, you know, that has this, the average person isn't going to have it to that extreme, but it certainly does happen. And then you've got people that talk about, obviously, the incubus succubus, which is an actual sexual violation. You've got people being pulled into the astral realm. And then there's a little bit of a bleed over with the UFO abduction phenomenon. There's people that have sleep paralysis. Instead of driving it through a cornfield, they're actually in bed. They wake up, they're having what begins to be a sleep paralysis experience. But instead of a shadow person or a red-eyed demon or an old hag, they're actually seeing the little green men. And there's some differences. A lot of times sleep paralysis, it's shrouded in darkness, and it involves doors. And with the UFO abduction version, a lot of times it's bright lights. It's lights coming in through the window. And it's window-oriented rather than door-oriented. So there's a few little differences there. But I do think that both experiences are an abduction experience.
You know, it's interesting that I'll admit it, I'm a Lord of the Rings and Hobbit nerd. And it reminds me of a scene in there where at the last battle against Gondor, where anyways, one of the orcs was like, "This is the age of the orc," you know, and yet, at least that's what they were hoping. But in the same way, as we think about prophecy, we're coming to the end game. We're coming to the end of the age. Jesus described about the end of the age. The disciples in the Olivet Discourse asked about what are the signs of the end of the age, and Jesus describes many of these things, and Paul begins to describe that as we approach the end of the age, we see an increase in demonic and overt demonic activity. We know in Revelation 9 that they're worshiping demons. It says very clearly that they're worshiping demons. The tribulation period is going to be one of worship of the dragon, all through the book of Revelation. Again, worship appears, the mark of the beast is related to that. But we also know as Christians that there is a real spiritual warfare. We've been talking about this, Ephesians 6:12. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's principalities and powers of these evil hosts that are dwelling in the heavenlies. So as we think about as we come to the end, there's going to be an increase where it's as if God says, okay, Satan and your hordes, I'm going to give you, this is going to be your age. Now, it's however long that lasts, I'm going to give you a short time. We see that in Revelation 12. He's cast down and he has a short time. So as it relates to spiritual warfare and the increase of spirituality, we were talking earlier about what we see in our culture, some of the shows and some of the overtness of the occult coming in and being commonplace. Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, you know, they used to operate under the cover of darkness. And like we were saying, in the past, if you were part of a secret society or a brotherhood,
Wiccans, whatever,
yeah. Yeah, it was upon payment of death if you let those secrets out. Everything was very esoteric. You know, even the word occult means secret. Everything operates under this cover of darkness and under deception, which is what I absolutely love about Jesus is everything the Father has told me I've made known to you. I don't have any secrets. And how do you love the idea that God is so brilliant, and powerful that he can lay his end game out verbatim in the book of Revelation. He's even telling the enemies, this is what I'm going to do, and he's still going to beat them. And so the fact that they have to operate under all this secrecy and trickery, and we see it all the way back to the beginning with the serpent in the garden. He had to dupe them into that. And so one of the ways that they used to subtly get to us is there would be all these kind of subliminal messages in our television, in our music. And so, you'd have a song, for example, where they're talking about a car, but it's all these like silly double entendres, and you know that they're really not talking about a car, they're talking about a woman. And so everything was very hidden and,
cloaked, yeah.
and subtle. And now they are just letting it all hang out, which says to me that they must think we're to the end and we got it in the bag. Because there's going to be no consequences whatsoever now if I give away all these secrets, because it's too late anyway. The train is so far down the tracks that there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So now they're just mocking us with it. But one of the shows in particular that we talked about came out just this month. I think it's only 1 or 2 episodes out. It's called Little Demon, and it's on FX, and so it's a Fox distributed show. By
Danny DeVito, and he's part of it. I mean, think about it. These aren't just
A-listers.
Second rate. These are A-listers, yeah.
A-listers, yep. But under the umbrella of 20th Century Fox, Disney just bought them out. And so who's the parent? Who's always,
Seems to be a
follow the
common
money
source,
and
yeah.
you find the mouse, right?
Yeah.
And so Disney made a promise, and they're pretty good at breaking their promises. They made a promise that they would never put out rated R content. And this show is a rated M for mature. But that is the equivalent to the rated R in the movie industry. And so if they broke that promise, the next promise that they're going to break is, right now this show, Little Demon, it's not prime time, it's late at night, it's marketed towards adults, but you absolutely know ultimately who they're driving this towards.
I mean, with the
it's a cartoon.
Yeah, and the age of the main person is 13, right? Yeah, so
13. First thing you learn in writing fiction, I have a writing degree. The first thing you learn when you're writing young adult fiction is you pick what audience you want to read that book, and you make the main character that age. And so I'm sure Disney knows that. And so Little Demon, absolutely overt. And it's literally, this girl is the Antichrist because her mother and Satan had their little tryst, and so she goes to hell to meet Dad.
So she's a Nephilim.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yep. And so all sorts of predictive programming in there. So the Satan character, who's voiced by Danny DeVito, is surprised that his child is not male, and then he quickly recovers and he said, well, the female's the future. And we're already seeing in our culture, they're pushing that on our culture everywhere, with the whole can't define a woman and abortion. And this is all just, it's all the way back in the Old Testament, with the Queen of Heaven and Inanna, Astarte, Aphrodite, whatever you want to call her. And so this is the kind of fodder that's going out to our children. But even if it's not that overt, even like the cartoons, like what is it, like the Tiny Titans, and I can't remember the one. Almost all of the superheroes are mythological. They go back to like the mythologies and the gods in the pantheon, and our kids, whether they realize it or not, are being instructed in the theology and the doctrine of all of these entities and these deities and these Nephilim and these ancient Old Testament gods. We go to church every Sunday and we hear these sermons. These cartoons and these movies, they're sermons from the other side.
Let's bring it back a little bit in the sense that, what we're seeing is, again, as the end game approaches, that wickedness, pure evil, again, the spiritual war, Paul says that, for our warfare, our struggle, again, is a real struggle. This isn't something to make believe. And so here we are, we're watching it increase, we're watching the heyday, and it's only going to get worse in that, 1 Timothy 4, that in the latter times many will depart from the faith and give heed to what? Doctrines of demons. So we see these seducing spirits, right, and doctrine of demons. So we look at our culture and we go, how in the world did we get here? So it's amazing, again, as you mentioned, all the confusion and all the other things that are happening. But in the same way, what I see is in the gospel period, in the messianic period, when Jesus was coming, you can read the Old Testament and you might get a demon here or there. I mean, that Old Testament's big. But you come to the gospel, it's like a demonic, exorcism that Jesus is doing on every page. You're like, where in the world? So we have precedent, I guess is what I'm saying, in biblical theology, of it increased in the Messianic period. And so as we see in the book of Revelation, demonism and everything is unleashed on the world. Revelation 9, hundreds of millions of demons are opened, out of the pit. So I guess what I'm saying is this: spiritual warfare is making its way now. Would we expect spiritual warfare, one of the weapons, you said exposing the dark weapon of sleep paralysis, this is only one of the weapons that he has, would we expect it to increase? And secondly, I imagine this doesn't happen to Christians, right?
It absolutely does. In fact, we're the targeted individuals in many cases. Like, obviously, if you're dabbling in the occult and you're learning how to astral project,
you're playing with fire.
You're going to get it. But the audience that I'm writing to are all the people where I didn't ask for this. I didn't provoke this. Now, maybe there's things I'm doing wittingly or unwittingly to open the doors and make things hard on myself, but that's why I kind of compare this to an abduction scenario, because when we're getting pulled up against our will into the astral realm, and we don't even know it till we wake up, because you just think it's a dream, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, wait a minute, darn, and so these are people that don't want anything to do with this, and so very often it's happening to Christians, and it can happen as people become Christians, or they try to level up in their faith or go deeper, or pursue some sort of like career in the ministry or something like that. But there's also, and I hint at this at the book, we have several examples in Scripture where the enemy knew in advance certain people that were going to grow up and be a thorn in his side. And he knew that his agenda was going to be thwarted if these men really saw the seat of power that they were going to find. And he, what the enemy meant for evil, God meant for good. So that meant that the enemy was actually involved in trying to separate Joseph from his family and from his heritage, and getting him put into prison.
Because he had the dream. It was a prophetic dream, no doubt.
Yep. So the enemy was involved in that. And we know with Moses, they were going to kill all the firstborn. And there's even a very fascinating story in the book of Jasher about Abraham's origins and how he almost didn't make it, and how Nimrod actually sought to kill Terah's son. And then obviously Jesus, we see Jesus, who they had to escape to Egypt and get out of the way there. And so it's possible, and I'm always leery with this because not everybody's a Job. Not everybody is such a threat to the enemy that, he's got to go to that extreme. And we really have to remain humble. I hear this all the time, like, you've got a target on your back, if someone's going into it. And it's true, but let's not take that to the point where we think that we're so dangerous that the enemy just trembles when we get out of bed and stuff like that.
I'm not big enough for him to worry about me.
Exactly. And so I tell people, be very careful with this bit of information. But if we are the end age, that means that people being born today and who are alive today will in essence be a part of that end times scenario. And we're going to have to be a lot more savvy, courageous, strong, and smart and knowledgeable than our generation currently is.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because what I see often is, it's here, especially those that have been talking prophecy for decades. Oftentimes I see people getting discouraged, and I go, hey, God has called us to this time to watch it and to see it unfold, and we need to stand up, and again, as you mentioned, Joshua, we need to be the Joshua generation that as we're watching things unfold, it is going to get worse and worse. We can't pray it away. There is an end time scenario that cannot be undone. It has to be fulfilled. Right. And so if we believe that's us, we need to step up, and part of what I was reading, what I get out of the book is, one of the weapons of spiritual warfare, in addition to what we see in our culture and the turning upside down of the culture and the morals and everything else, is this idea of possibly increased sleep paralysis, again, as a weapon. But as Christians, we expect spiritual warfare. You've outlined in the book This is how to engage in it. Don't be fearful. I mean, it's natural. But as any warfare that comes, could be physical. Maybe you're just having a physical challenge. Maybe you're being attacked in all the different ways that Satan does. This is one of the weapons, and the goal is to be equipped.
Yeah. Absolutely. In the same way as Joseph, the enemy meant it for evil, but God worked it for good. And it's the same thing with sleep paralysis. The enemy can say, I know the way to beat this person down. Yeah. I know the way to make this person completely ineffective. Because how are you going to have confidence that in the end times you are going to have some sort of courage beyond your years when you're terrified of your own dreams? You're alone at night in the dark and you're scared. So it's basically trying to send a message to would-be warriors. You're a coward. You're not a warrior. But the way that the Father can use it for good is, it is boot camp. When you're having sleep paralysis, you are learning the weapons of spiritual warfare. It is boot camp. And so the enemy is going to, I think, be very shocked when he unleashes his Black Awakening super soldier army that Russ used to write about, and he realizes that all those people he was tormenting and thought he had beat down because of the sleep paralysis are actually the ones strengthened for the battle.
Yeah. Vicki, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mondo.
It's been great talking about this, and as we think about prophecy and think about the way that we are heading into the end game, God is equipping His saints to stand strong. And again, all the way, we don't know when. Again, I'm a pre-trib guy, but that doesn't mean that I'm giving up or I'm just going to just go hide out somewhere. We're going to fight all the way till the end until Jesus calls us home, and we're going to try to continue to evangelize, get the word out, and to stand strong and to do it, and with humility, because favorite verse, and as relates to John 15:5, apart from me, you can do nothing. And that's Jesus telling us to rely on Him always. And so His grace is sufficient. So appreciate you watching this prophecy update today. And we will continue to bring you, again, very interesting and I would say very relevant topics. So thank you, Vicki, for being here. And we will see you next time.